This is Passion for Your Passions, a podcast where we talk about the great interests that in the darkness bind us. I'm Krista.
And I'm Julie. Today, we're talking about Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring.
Come on, son. Ask Rosie for a dance. I think I'll just have another ale. This is it. This is what? If I take one more step, blimey, you fools, it'll be the farthest away from home I've ever been. I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
So, this is a ginormous topic for us. We're already not focused and excited about it. It's gonna be a long recording. But we did finally decide to talk about Lord of the Rings because of Bilbo's birthday. And we wanted to shorten it to just the Fellowship of the Ring. Nothing else. Not Tolkien, not anything else. Just the Fellowship of the Ring.
And we're going to try our best to adhere to that. So if we get off topic, we have to be like, Julie, no. I could hit something, but it would ruin the recording.
We'll mess it up.
That's the sad part about this. So, no.
You're gonna hit the mic!
I just punched the mic.
I hit the wall slightly adjacent to me. She was gonna straight up punch the fucking mic.
And that's our cold open. No. Not really. So we have like several different parts that we can talk about with this, that we just kind of like split it up, like as always, just to make things a little bit better for us. So we're going to talk about the book. We're going to talk about the movie. We're going to talk about like if we think there are any improvements we think could be made, and also just like things in general, like little fun facts and stuff that we'll throw throughout. I also have the book sitting right beside me just because there are maybe a couple of quotes that I want to talk about, because there's a couple gems in this book that are just like, I think they need to be mentioned. More people need to talk about these quotes. They upset me.
Everyone talks about wandering and getting lost, but nobody talks about how rainbow-esque Saruman was.
And Tom Bombadil. When everybody talks about the book, okay, well, let's just get into it. Let's go from here. We're talking about the book.
Right. So, some of the things that make the book so wonderful in and of itself, we're not talking like the story, we're talking about the book, is it's quirky and weird right out the goddamn gate. Like, it is a very unique style of writing that Tolkien is just very known for. From the very beginning of this book, you can tell he just loves hobbits. Just the way he talks about them and the details that he puts in, as unnecessary and slightly slow as they can be in the beginning, you get a love for this race that you didn't really know much about until now. Like, even in The Hobbit, he doesn't talk about hobbits as, like, a race that much. He talks about Bilbo amongst the hobbits in a way, but, like, Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring is very much, like, hobbits. Like, this is what they are. This is their world. Mm-hmm. And that's just a wonderful way to get in.
And I mean, like, there's a lot of themes throughout Lord of the Rings, which, I mean, maybe we'll get into, like, as we go throughout this, like, as a series. But, like, the big thing about Lord of the Rings is it's supposed to be kind of like a big allegory for when Tolkien was in World War II, I believe. And so there's a lot of stuff, like, the whole thing, like, I think about the hobbits is, like, it's supposed to be very, like, homey. Like, they're supposed to feel, like, very nostalgic. Like, they're, like, farmers. They're good, like, fun-loving boys. Like, that's, like, the most important things to them is, like, they love nature. They love farming. They love, you know, just, like, being, essentially. Like, family and drinking. And, you know, like, it's, like, fun, like, I guess would be the best way to describe them. They're very, like, I mean, they're a little bit thoughtful, too, I guess I would say, because they do like to read and things. But, like, it's, like, all, like, that kind of, like, they just make you feel nostalgic. That's, like, what I kind of feel when I feel for hobbits.
Well, for me, and this goes even into Tom Bombadil as well, there's the idea, like, in the background, or the main story, is really, like, good versus evil, light versus dark. But when you look at the history, and when you look at hobbits and Tom Bombadil, they are about living now. they don't, like, the hobbits aren't really aware of the impending doom that has befallen them. They are very part of now and what is happening, and they're just living life, which is something Tolkien always tries to kind of, like, bridge and carry throughout, that living life in the moment is just as important as fighting evil.
And I think even, too, I mean, because like I said, this whole thing was like a big kind of allegory type of thing, but that, what you were talking about, has to get into, like, the tragedy of Frodo, which, like, again, some of this we'll get more into, like, as we go throughout the rest of them, but that kind of is the thing. It's the main character, Frodo, just in case anybody, doesn't know about Lord of the Rings.
Get the fuck out.
Yeah, this is maybe not the podcast
day for you.
If you want to pick it up and, try to learn about this, watch the movie, that sort of thing. We'll get into our recommendations later, but Frodo, the main character, he essentially is given this great burden, and this great burden is a ring, which is essentially the ring, we'll just say it's like the ring that can end the world. That's like the idea behind it. And it really is a hard thing for him because, like I said, the hobbits, like, they're supposed to be like this nostalgic, like, very fun-loving people. They don't really, like Julie was saying, they don't really care about the rest of the world. They're very, like, I mean, honestly, like, in a lot of ways, it is kind of like where we're from, in the land of the corn. Like, it's like there's this, like, I like my life. Like, I like this stuff. I don't care. Like, I don't care what those people out there are doing. This is us, that type of thing. And, like, Frodo struggles with that because he's like, I love my home. If, the bad comes here and destroys it, that would suck because I love this. So it's like, I have to do it.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning of the book, they speak about Frodo so highly, like, especially Bilbo, who's just talking, because the beginning of the book is a lot of Bilbo perspective, more or less. And Frodo's just spoken so highly of from everybody. Even people that think the Bagginses are weird. They're like, but that Frodo, like, he's this great guy, like, he helps everybody, he loves his uncle, his friends love him. They put him, like, higher than most of the hobbits, especially because of his perspective and his way to help people and always want to do good. And so then to have this burden that it almost like he wanted it. It's almost like something he wished for, that he wished he could help the world. He wished he could do more. And then gets taken back by this horrible burden that ruins him in a way. Like, it does. And that is a tragic story in and of itself, like you were saying, that it's kind of like the good hero is crushed by the burden of reality.
Yeah, and it's like, essentially, he does it because he doesn't want the good to be destroyed. And that's what it is. Like, it's like, I don't, like, maybe there was, like, a part of him, he wanted to travel, or maybe he wanted it a little bit, but, like, it's more like he doesn't want the bad to happen to people, so he's like, I'll just take all the bad.
He'll sacrifice his good, his life, to make sure that the good stays in the world.
And that's Frodo. And I mean, I think it is interesting. I mean, like, the thing to think about too, which I think we're going to get into some of, like, the weird things about this book for people who don't know. But this is an older book, so, like, some of the fantasy things in here probably do feel a little bit tropish, especially now.
Because he's the father of fantasy.
He's the father of fantasy. I will say that, like, pretty much nobody writes like Tolkien. It's very, people try to mimic it, but it's very, he writes a very particular way. And, like, it's very clear he spent so long writing these books. And I think that that's the thing, too, that a lot of people don't realize. Like, when they're trying to mimic Tolkien, like, he probably spent, like, most of his life writing this book. So that's why it's so hard to replicate. Like, he thought about everything.
Well, essentially, these books came from, which we were like, we're not talking about Tolkien.
Well, I'm just talking about it, like, generally. Like, because that is, like, a thing. Is, like, many fantasy people are like, oh, yeah, I want to write a Tolkien. And it's like, dude, like, he spent,
like, your life.
Yeah, he spent so long. And, like, this book definitely reflects that. Like, there is so much thought to everything. Like, it's just, like, everything has a history. Like, it's very, like, even when they're talking about the past and stuff, it's very clear that he basically had, like, a timeline of all of the events, every building, and, like, yeah, it's wild. If you like that kind of fantasy, this is all the detail.
Yeah, but it's also not easy. It's not something, like, if you're new to fantasy and you go, well, Tolkien's the best, I should know. Like, it is not an easy read. As much as we love it and we're totally invested in it and would tell anybody to read it, It is not an easy thing to read. It is very hard, especially at first. And, like, even if you're just trying to learn the history and you pick up the Silmarillion, like, holy hell, is that hard to read? Like, it's, but Tolkien came up with these just because he was telling funny stories and ballads to his kids and then just developed this whole world around it. And you can really tell when you're reading the books.
Yeah.
That's just so much, like Krista was saying.
Do you want to talk about some of the good moments? And then we can talk about some of the weaker moments?
Well, I love, as every person who's read the book, Tom Bombadil. And I was actually listening to something today because some people are happy he's not in the movie, which everyone I've known is like, why didn't they put him in the movie? And this person had a really good perspective, is what we were talking about with hobbits, that they're living in the now, that it's not the fight of good and evil, it's just existing. Tom Bombadil is a very, like, you don't know why he's there. Like, he's not a good guy. He's not a bad guy. He's a very neutral, like, and he's kind of the idea of nature and neutrality. Like, he's just super powerful, like one of the, if not the oldest being at that age and everything. But he just doesn't do anything. Like, he doesn't contribute other than to house the hobbits for, like, a hot second.
And the other thing, too, like, I'll mention just, like, to kind of vaguely talk about this, so one of the other things about, like, Tolkien being the way that he is, and he thought a lot of things out, is there do end up being kind of almost, like, angels and deities. Like, there are, like, a lot of Christian themes in this book. I wouldn't say it's, like, the most front forward, but, like, it's there. Like, I think Gandalf and, like, the wizards and stuff are essentially, like, angels.
They're the
like,
Ishtari. They're, like, more elemental-based ancient beings of whatnot.
Yeah. And I think, like, Tom Bombadil he's, like, a force of nature is kind of the way that, like, I always read him as, is, like, he is essentially, like, there's, like, a certain amount of land or something, and, like, he is that land. Like, he's the personification of the land. So I don't know if you call him a deity. I don't really quite know, but...
Well, it's said that Tolkien specifically said he was not a god. He was not that kind of figure. He very specifically was... Apparently it came from a doll that his kids had that got flushed down the toilet. Like, it's a weird, funny thing. And so he started writing little songs and ditties, like, about this character. And the first story of him was that he was lost in the woods and fought, like, this water spirit and took the daughter of the spirit and married her to be Goldenberry. But in The Lord of the Rings, like, he's not talked about a whole lot. So then in The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, he's just this dude who's silly and weird and will randomly say something really serious and dark, but then say it in a funny tune instead of, like... And then the One Ring of Power has no power over him. It doesn't even make him invisible, and he can still see Frodo, because technically he's older than the ring and older than, like, everything in being, because Elrond refers to him as, like, the Elder... No, he refers to himself as the Elder One, and Elrond speaks to him as if nothing is older than him. So he's just, like, OP as fuck, but doesn't care, and just is there, just like nature kind of is. So how he's written is what you're saying, where it's like he's an embodiment of nature. Like, he is what he is. It's not bad, good, whatever. It is what it is.
Yeah, because, I mean, there's even, like, a part later where, like, at the Council of Elrond, where they're basically like, oh, should we just give it to him? And they're like, well, you could, but, like, also, like...
What the fuck would he do?
He might also give it away. Like, it's like he doesn't care about it. Like, he wouldn't. It's nothing to him, essentially. And, like, yeah, there's all this weird stuff with Tom Bombadil specifically.
So that's probably why he's cut for the movies, because they didn't know what to do with him.
Yeah, and he doesn't come back.
No, he's not, like, an important character. He's just very interesting historically, and kind of, I think it would be a really cool idea for a show to expand upon his story and make him, like, a more prevalent character. Because you could do that with so many things in Tolkien's world.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of things. And, I mean, even one of those, which I have to mention my boy, Bill the Pony, because that guy, he's got the best arc in the whole story. Oh my gosh, Bill the Pony. Everybody loves Bill the Pony. And it is, I mean, they do mention him in the movie. They're like, oh yeah.
They literally just cast him away.
And then they're like,
you are a good horse.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
But in the books, it's basically like they get him from, I think it's like Bree, the first town they go to. And it's like some dude is like beating this horse, and like he's got a miserable life. He looks so skinny, he's frail, all this stuff, and they give it to him because like they're like, whatever, he's gonna die or something. And so Sam has him and is like all skeptical about him at first. And then like just slowly he starts getting better and better and he's like super happy and he becomes like a really good companion. And then yeah, when they go to Moria, they get rid of him and it's like, man, I want Bill the Pony to come back.
I want him to have his time and his story. I thought he ended up back with Tom Bombadil.
He might have, but I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've read the later books, so I'll have to see, but like I don't think he comes back in Fellowship for sure.
I think
they basically cast him away at Moria.
Because Tom Bombadil, like, is one of his things is that he takes care of the stray horses and the lost and all that kind of thing, and I think he ends up with Bill the Pony. I think.
It's possible. I'm not positive. All I know is that
Bill the Pony and Tom Bombadil dynamic duo.
Yeah, go live out their lives. I will also say, I am very partial to like the beginning part that is essentially Bilbo's birthday. I think that part is very well written. I think it's very like Julie was saying, making you care about the hobbits, and it's this very weird way to make you care about them, but it does. Like, you, for whatever reason, you are like extremely invested in this random birthday party, and like almost word for word it's the same in the movie. Like, yeah, that whole birthday.
It's so similar. And then I think the only thing they don't add is that in the book, obviously you know what hobbit is talking. Like, they say, you know, this is Farmer Maggot, this is so and so. In the movies, they just have them, you know, yelling or calling out, and you don't know what hobbit's what. In the books, it's like, you know all the families, you know all the names, like, you know how they're correlative, because it's like a bunch of old people talking when they're like, yeah, you remember so-and-so's son? Yeah, and this person did, like, it's very much like that you have to learn all these people's names all at once, because a bunch of old people are just talking and reminiscing, and it's very relatable and very, like, homey, like hobbits are meant to be.
Yeah, and I like that part, and I mean, for me particularly, I love world building, so like stuff like that, and especially like it being as good as it is. Like, if you've watched the movie, which we are going to get to the movie, it is like pretty much exactly the same. And like even when I rewatch the movie, like that is one of my favorite parts, is the birthday scene. Like, I love the birthday scene a lot. So
yeah, it's pretty. I think even the movie adds a few bits because of the lack of understanding each hobbit and individuality. They add a bunch of little things that I think are even better. Like, that's their way of doing it, which is really great. So, yeah, the books are, while we're mentioning all this, the first half of the Fellowship is completely different than the second half. It is
in tone
and everything, but
they're like two completely different books.
They really are.
The first half, I mean, I'll let you keep going, but like the first half is very light and the second half is like dark.
Yeah. But what's interesting to kind of compare to the movies that I find is the end of the Fellowship movie is technically the beginning of the Two Towers, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's a completely different tone in the books. And like, Boromir dies, that's the beginning of the Two Towers. And so, like, that's when stuff settles in a lot more. Because the Fellowship, the first half is just, you know, hobbits and adventure and silliness and weird and, like, just all these cool things. And as you get into the second half, it just keeps getting slowly more serious. And then it cuts right there to be like, and now it's dark as fuck. Like, and now we are hella serious. And so it's kind of interesting that the movies wanted to give you, I guess, more of a bite at the end, because, I mean, it would have ended with them on the river, more or less, I think.
No, I think in the books, it's been a couple months since I reread it, but, like, I think it basically ends with them. Oh, no, it ends with them separating, because that's what I was telling you about that. Like, it's so bizarre, because it's basically, like, Frodo runs off, and then, like, Aragorn is like, oh, well, like, what should we do? So then they're just, like, all running around the hill. Like, that's where it ends, is, like, them just being like, fuck! Like, running around.
And then, next book, Boromir shot.
Like, immediately.
Yeah, it's the, like, first chapter, Boromir's, like, ganked. Like,
it's very, very bizarre. Yeah. But I have things to say about the Two Towers, but we're not getting into Two Towers yet. We're still talking about this. So, I will say, because we're getting closer to the part where we're going to talk about the movies, I personally probably recommend the movies more than I do the books, especially because of this tone thing. The first half really is, like, it's
silly.
bizarre.
It's just
yeah,
weird
it's
and
very
silly.
I could see people, like, especially if you watch the movies, maybe not liking it. It's very windy in that part. I mean, you say that a lot. That's kind of a Julie quote. But, like, some of the plots in the first half are, like, so much of it did not end up in the movies. Like, there's this whole thing, and look, I gotta talk about some of the stuff that happens in this book that's, like, very bizarre. It does not happen in the movies. Like, that there is a real estate thing that Frodo goes through for like 3 chapters. It is basically, and I don't even understand it. I still don't really get it. It's like essentially him being like, well, I can't just leave Bag End because then like people will talk. So like I gotta go move over to, I forget the name of it now, but it's like a different section of the Shire. So it's like this whole thing of him like packing up all of his stuff, and like in the middle of the night he doesn't even get on a carriage. Like he's like, I'm gonna go walk over there. And then he gets there and he's like there for one night and then he leaves. And I'm like, I do not understand this real estate section of this book. It went on for so long. And then the other part that really cracked me up is all of the things, like the way people talk about things, because the first one that cracked me up was when Gandalf and Frodo first talk about the ring. Because first of all, Gandalf just like basically shows up. Okay, actually, I should mention this too. The timeline is a bit weird in the books, and they don't do as much of this in the movies. Like, for one thing, Frodo is a bit older. Like, I want to say he's like 50. He's like something around there.
Well, he's like finally hit maturity age for a hobbit. So like, at the beginning of the book, he's like 30 or 35. Mm-hmm. And then essentially Bilbo leaves. Gandalf's like, hey, the ring, and has that whole bit that's pretty much word for word between him and Bilbo. And then he's like, I need to research this. And then just fucks off for 20 years. For 20 years, he's like going tower to tower and researching this ring of power and all of the rings of power. And then he comes back, so now Frodo's like 50.
Yeah, and it's okay, so getting back to this point, this was the one, it just cracked me up because, like, Gandalf comes back, and, like, Frodo's like, hey, like, are you okay and stuff? And, like, Gandalf's like, no, I'm not. Like, he's like, well, do you want to talk about it? And he's like, no, we can't talk about this stuff in the sunlight or, like, at nighttime. Oh, yeah, that's what it is. We can't talk about it at night. And, like, Frodo's like, okay. So then they just awkwardly sit there for hours until the sun rises. And then Frodo's like, so the sun is out? Can we talk about this? And then they proceed to have like a 3-hour conversation where essentially what happens is Gandalf just talks for like 3 hours. Like, Frodo says minimally nothing. Like, he maybe will be like, or something. But then, like, it's just Gandalf being like, this sucks, shit is fucked, this is the ring of power, we're doomed. And like, it's just, it was like, oh my gosh, this conversation. I kept like thinking it was gonna be over, and then it kept going. And then what cracks me up even further is later they do this again because they have the Council of Elrond, which the Council of Elrond in the books is like, it's like
everyone's background story in the whole realm.
Oh my gosh. And so, like, I forget, they have like a good amount of people there, but like about half of the people in the Council of Elrond tell their story. Like, Bilbo tells his story, Gandalf tells his story, I think like Elrond tells his story, Legolas has something to say, Frodo tells his story, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how long is this going for? Because everybody's telling everything about their lives, essentially. Oh my gosh, yeah, that... From there, people do tend to stop just telling you things. But yeah, that was pretty hard, both of those scenes, because both of them were like, is this gonna be over? Because, like, this is the biggest info dump of all info dumps ever.
I think when I read The Fellowship the first time, I definitely page skipped. When I was just like, dude, like, I get it. Like, especially since you've seen the movie, so you already know, like, gist of things. I skipped, like, most of the Council of Elrond, I'll be square. And I even skipped the part where, like, Boromir and Aragorn have their awkward, like, meeting, and they talk about the sword and all this, like, humanity. I'm like, dude. Like, I think Aragorn, like, walks up to the statue like he does in the movie, and then he goes to, like, talk about the history of this sword, but then doesn't tell you what the sword is. So, like, you don't really know it's Isildur's sword. You're just like, why do you care so much? Like, why are we talking about this?
Yeah.
You just don't
Oh my
understand.
gosh. That is exactly what it is with that Gandalf scene. Because it's just like, Gandalf, like, this is, like, a lot. Okay, I get it, but, like,
Yeah.
this is so
With
much.
artifacts and weapons, especially in the first book, it's just like, what are you talking about? Why are we still doing this?
I know, and then the Council of Elrond thing, it's like, could you given me, like, the shorter version? Like, I don't need to, like, hear all of this. I'm not sure all of this is relevant. This is a lot.
It's just character building through storytelling, which I get, and I love him for. But yet, when you do it in these huge chunks, you're just like, fucking move on. Like,
Yeah.
why is everyone doing this right now?
And for sure, I think the second half is more readable. I mean, there is that tonal shift, but, like, even just in the way that he writes, like, honestly, I kind of wonder if he did, like, a weird gap or something in between writing those two sections, because they're really different. Like, once you get to the second half, and I mean, this book does have a split, it, like, has a part 2. Once you get to part 2, like, it literally feels like a different book.
Well, it's like book 1 is the storytelling, the character building, the, like, his love of who they are is showing and the love of the world, while the second book is like this, or the second part is like, this is the adventure. This is the story happening now that I've set it all up and you know who I'm talking about. So I think that's really what I would think he's going for, is him, like, world building. All right, adventure time. Like let's fucking go.
Yeah.
So,
but by the second half, things just kind of happen. It's like things happening. So, like, it's a little bit,
well,
it's
like
not
the first
so much
half,
people shouting at you.
the first half is pretty much like up to what, the council, a little bit after
I think that the first part of part 2 is the council. So, like, it's basically after the council.
Yeah, but to put in perspective, like, think of how much else happens after that. Like, you've got the Mines of Moria, you've got the, like, even the Bridge of Khazad-dûm is, like, this huge part, you've got the river, you've got, like, all this other stuff happens all in the second part.
Yeah.
You have all the Hobbit and the weird character building in the first half.
Yeah. All of the, like, action points.
Yeah, you've got Galadriel, you've got, like, all of this shit happening in the second part. To end our little book section, we have some favorite quotes.
Well, okay, these are kind of more silly quotes, and I think people just need to know. I need to find this.
Yeah, everyone knows the big
one.
popular, like, heavy-handed, beautiful quotes, but we need
Yeah,
these
not all who wonder who lost that people technically quote incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
Because they, like, use it to quote Wanderlust, and that's not really what it's
kind of
about.
sad.
Okay, this is the thing. Okay, so another thing I will say that cracks me up about Tolkien particularly, I only really have 2 quotes I want to go over, but, like, he has this, he writes in a very interesting way where, so, like, Frodo is technically the main character, but other characters are also sort of, like, they'll
Take
talk.
perspective.
Yeah, it's very strange. And, like, the first time that this really happened cracked me up because for some reason it was just a random fox. And I don't know really why he did this, but, like, so there's this part where they're walking to the next part of the Shire, right? For the whole real estate thing that I was talking about. And so it's... Then each, in an angle of the great tree's roots, they curled up in their cloaks and blankets and were soon fast asleep. They set no watch. Even Frodo feared no danger yet, for they were still in the heart of the Shire. A few creatures came and looked at them when the fire had died away. A fox passing through the wood on business of his own stopped several minutes and sniffed. Hobbits, he thought. Well, what next? I have heard of strange doings in this land, but I have seldom heard of a hobbit sleeping outdoors under a tree. 3 of them? There's something mighty queer behind this. He was right, but he never found out any more about it. And I'm like, do I really need to know the perspective of this fox?
Yeah.
It's just so bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like the first time where I was like, okay.
Yeah, he passes the perspective around. Like, it starts with Bilbo mostly, and just general hobbits, like, in passing. But he does it really smoothly. Like, even that, as silly as it is, it's still smooth as fuck. Like, just... And then a fox came by and wondered, what the fuck are they doing here?
And he never found
and he
any-
never remembered. Like, and then his life was a mystery.
Yeah.
Like,
So that was one. And then this is the one. So I've shared this second quote with people because I just, like, I can't believe this is just one is so funny to me. Let me find exactly where it starts. Okay. So this is when Saruman and Gandalf are, like, having their whole thing and, like, they fight and all this stuff. So this is, like, the first time when, like, Gandalf is starting to realize that he's a little bit evil. And so Saruman's talking, and he's, like, talking about Radagast the Brown. And he's like, "Yet he had the wit to play the simple part that I sent him. For you have come, and that was all the purpose of my message. And here you will stay, Gandalf the Grey, and rest from journeys. For I am Saruman the Rise, Saruman the Ringmaker, Saruman of many colors." And so then Gandalf says that he looked then and saw that his robes, which had seemed white, were not so, but were woven of all colors, and if moved, they shimmered and changed in hue, so that the eye was bewildered. And Gandalf says, "I liked white better." So Gandalf did not like Saruman's rainbow. Apparently Saruman, who was Saruman the White, changed his cloak to a rainbow cloak. And then Gandalf was like, I'm not about
white
that.
Power. Unacceptable.
I don't know how this was never something that, like, I caught, but when I was reading this, my most recent time, it was like, Saruman had a rainbow cloak?
What?
Excuse me?
Excuse?
That really changes a lot of, like, feelings about Saruman. So.
Yeah, I don't think I caught, I mean, I guess we read it when we were younger.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was something we're like, it shimmers, cool. And then, like, I moved on.
No, it's rainbow. And Gandalf, he likes the white better. Which.
What a salty bitch. Like, he's just jealous.
Okay. Cool.
So my story time, I guess, isn't really a funny story, because all mine are, like, dangerous or funny. This is just kind of, like, a cool thing that kind of happened to me. So I went to a couple estate sales. It was like summer of 2020, I think. And one was because a family friend, her husband passed, and essentially we didn't want to, like, ask her for stuff. She kept trying to give us stuff, but we're like, no. And she had an estate sale while she wasn't home, essentially. So we went and, like, bought stuff from her. And then my mom, she's the one who went with me. She went, okay, there's another one, like, on my way to work. This was fun. Do you want to go one? I said, sure, let's go. So we go to this house and walk in. And estate sales, if you haven't been to one, are either great or just really depressing. Like, there's really no in between. And this one was a mixed bag. Like, we came late to the game, so there was a lot of stuff that, like, clearly was missing. I wandered into this weird sunroom where I guess they made candles. So I was like, this smells cool. And, like, I got 2 of the candles. They were like $3 each. And then I stumbled into the library that was mostly untouched. And it was like floor to ceiling bookcases. And I just started looking through everything. And funny enough, I found a hard copy of the Silmarillion, like, early release, like 3 years after Tolkien died. Like,
whoa.
Book I've been actually looking for. And so I grabbed that and, like held it to my chest like, this is the book. And it was in perfect condition. And I started looking around and I found, like, I can't remember how to pronounce his name, but the author of Jurassic Park, they had a whole collection of all of his books. And so, like, I started stacking them. So I have, like, a stack of hardcover books.
Michael Crichton.
Creighton.
That guy.
Creighton.
That guy.
I know his name, but, like, I never know Kraken.
Yeah. That guy.
So I got all of his books because I've been wanting to read more of his books. And I found, like, books on music, cookbooks, like, all this kind of stuff. So I have a stack of books already. And I go up to, like, I don't want to call it a register, but essentially where the people that you'd pay are. I'm like, so this is my stack of books. I probably will look more, essentially. And the guy looks at the books, looks at me, and he goes, do you want the whole library? And I, like, looked at him like, I don't know. He went, $15, whole library. You have to take all of it. I went, fuck, yeah! Like, I would have paid, like, $80 for, like, the books I picked out. Like, let's go. And so my mom wasn't there for that. And I had to tell her, be like, so I bought the entire library, and we stacked her car full of books. Like, we could not reverse because it was completely full. There were books on my lap. There were books, like, I was, like, curled up in my seat, like, books for days. And they had signed books. Like, they had a Martha Stewart book that was signed and, like, laminated because this couple was part of, like, a book club. And so they'd buy the book and read it and go get it signed and all this kind of stuff. There were a whole bunch of other, like, games and books that I wanted to read. In the end, it was about 800 some books, and I kept over 500 of them. And I traded the rest at like half price books and bought other books I wanted from there. And I ended up making like $100 worth of money from half price books. And then I had to make a library in my house because I have too many books.
Had to.
Well, they were stacked in every goddamn room. Like, I was like, I need to fix this.
Man, I need to see your copy of the Silmarillion. I don't think I've seen that, actually.
I have a whole Tolkien shelf in my library right now.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that. I think I might have known that you had looked at that, but maybe I didn't, like, really register it. But that is pretty cool, especially with it being that old.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at it, I'm like, oh my god, if this is signed by Tolkien, I will literally die. And it's like 3 years after his passing. I was like, close, though.
I bet it is hard to get a signed Tolkien.
I'm sure it's invaluable. Like, you couldn't put a price on that, I'm sure.
I wonder how often he did it.
He probably rarely did. I mean, he wasn't that popular when he was alive, right? Like,
well, I also kind of wonder, because I mean, like, now it's kind of a little bit easier to do that kind of thing. It was probably not as common back then, I would guess.
Yeah, to travel and like meet authors and things of the like.
Yeah, and also just even know where they are, because it was like, you know, it wasn't
Where's the
as
internet?
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
man, no, that is really cool. That for sure. Like, it would be kind of hard to do in the house that I have currently. Like, there's not really, like, a great place that I could put a library. We've talked about getting bookshelves and, like, more things like that so we can have more places to put our books, but I want a library. That's one of those things that's definitely on my list. Like, I want some of those, like, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves.
They had a room bigger than my living room of just floor-to-ceiling shelves and stacks of books.
Did they have ladders?
No, it wasn't that fancy.
That's what you need those fancy ladders so you can, like, live your...
They had one, but I think
your
they
bell
dismantled
moment.
it. Yeah. It's on the list. I want, like, a loft of books, essentially. That's what I wanted eventually. What I have now is fine.
No, yeah. I mean, there's things that I could do, but, like, I'm talking, like, dream.
Yeah, daydream.
Like, dream state. I want a library. But yeah, that is pretty cool. And I mean, I'm glad that it turned into a good thing, because it could have been one of those things where it's like, this was great, or this really sucked.
Yeah, like, I only wanted the books I found.
All the rest of these books are not so great, and
Yeah.
they're bad, and they're not in good condition. But
Well, it was just really fun to find how many that were signed, and like, to keep stumbling upon books that I've heard of or want to read, and which is funny. My mom's like, so you don't have to buy books for a while. I'm like, that's not how this works. And I like still buy books all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, now I have them. If there's like an apocalypse and I can't go buy more books, I have enough.
yeah, that's the curse of liking books. Is you're like, more books!
More books.
It's like, no, I need to read my books.
I need to read my... Yeah.
I need to stop wanting to buy books.
What happens to me now, especially, is like, I'll want to read a specific type of book to research it just because I'm in that mood. And I'll just keep buying those books and reading them like they're crack. And then suddenly I'll stop and then just have all these books left over. Like, oh, right.
Oh, yeah. We've had already talks about books and the problems I have with books, but I do love books. Mm-hmm. It's just, you know, it's a little bit of a struggle sometimes for me to find ones that I like.
Well, part of me, like, I never want to move because I'm like, God, the books.
The fucking
books.
That is true. You'd probably have to either get movers or...
Because like, for example, all my Tolkien books, I have hard copies and paper copies. Because I abuse the shit out of the paper copies and take them everywhere and read them. And I hold back the pristine, beautiful hardbacks forever. People ask me, will be like, why do you have, like, don't touch it. I still have, like, sealed hardcover collectible books.
It's pretty.
Yeah. And then when I get drunk, I order books. I ordered a $250 book on flowers the last time I got drunk. I was like, fuck.
I have wanted to buy some really, like, pretty editions of books. Oh my gosh, this is such a weird problem. But I wanted to buy because, okay, I read the first Witcher, and I really liked it, actually. Like, it was bizarre. I don't know.
I tried.
Which one did you read?
The Wish.
I don't think that's the first one. I can't remember what it is now. But, like... Anyway, I liked it, and I wanted to read a little bit more, but man, do I hate those book covers. Like, they're just so generic. They're not anything special, and it's just like, man, like, I wish I could buy, like, a nicer like, that was kind of even why I bought this version, which, I mean, that's kind of hard to talk about in an audio medium, but, like, basically there's not really, like, a lot on this fellowship. It's, like, the Mines of Moria door is basically what's on the cover there. It's very simple, it's red, but, like, I like that because it's, like, at least, like, I think it looks kind of nice, and, like, I don't tend to like the ones as much that look kind of weird, or they've got, like, dorky whatever things on. I mean, like, that's fine. I'm not saying that that's, like, bad. It's just, I like books. Like, I like the ones that look nice. Like, I think it's nice to have.
There's some company, because I've seen the videos, they make custom new covers, and they did one for Lord of the Rings that made me want to die. I was like, I will spend whatever amount of money you require of me.
I know. They had one actually, like, maybe it's not the same company, but I saw one like that for The Witcher, and I was like, but I don't even know if I like the whole series yet. So now I'm just like, I'm struggling with it.
That's definitely when I have too much expendable income, I'll just slowly get fancier and fancier book versions of. I'll have like 6 versions of one book because it's like, I love that book, and I just kept buying prettier, better covers of it.
I know. I want to have a really fancy shelf in my foyer.
Yeah.
Like a nice, like, one of those, like, asymmetrical, or, like, I mean...
I wanted the books to fall off the shelf.
Yeah. Yeah. No. God, that quote. I mean, I would love to have the floor to see. I think it would be a little weird in there unless, like, I got custom shelves. So I'm more talking about just, like, a really aesthetic shelf where it's, like, I could have some, like, fancy books in it, like... But then it'd be books that I like, and it just, like, look cool.
Yeah.
So.
There's a site,
Book
Eden Book
problems.
Press. Have you ever heard of it?
I don't think so.
Don't go there. It's like
Scared.
$50 to $500 books
Man.
in fancy. That's where I bought my flower book for $250. And you could do payment plans. Then you do 4 interest-free payment plans, and I'm like, done!
Go in
like
debt
50
over Lord of the
bucks.
Rings.
Let's go!
Man. Yeah.
You think I won't?
That's a good thing to go in debt.
Yeah, it's my library.
Okay.
Alright, movie time.
So now we're going to talk about the movies, which I think for both of us, I think we both tend to lean more towards the movies. I think both of us probably watched the movies first. I'm pretty sure I did, for sure. I might not have seen Return of the King.
That's where I'm at. I think I watched one, like, Fellowship and Two Towers, and then started reading and read The Return of the King before the Return of the King movie.
Mm-hmm. Which, we didn't mention this in the book section, too, but, I mean, because we talked about this way in the introduction, but this is actually how we became friends, and I feel like I should mention this again, just because, you know, in case people are just coming in on this, that I was reading, like, the huge Bible version of The Lord of the Rings, because, you know, I'm just, that's me, that's Krista, that's what I do. I do things like that at school, you know, being the badass 8-year-old kid, apparently, that I was, carrying this giant 1,000-page Bible thing, and then, yeah.
I had the same book. It was like, are you reading that?
It's like, yeah.
And then we became friends.
So, yeah.
Because of Lord of the Rings.
And I think it's, you know, at least important to mention, but we are talking about the movies, so we've already messed up.
We already fucked up. Maybe we should just put in a soundbite of our, like, intro episode talking about becoming friends because of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. If you want to listen to that in more detail, here's the bite. Go back. And listen to us. What other things have we even talked about in the intro? It's been, like, so long.
We were weird kids.
We became friends once.
We were friends. There was another Julie. Like, we did a whole thing.
Okay, but the movies. I think there's a lot that's very similar, and there's plenty that's different. I think, like, the general vibe is the same. Like, if you read the books, you're definitely going to get a gist for the story. They do, I will say, they cut a lot of that beginning section that I was saying where, like, the tone is kind of happier and flittier and all that kind of stuff. And they kind of layer in more of the tone that's the rest of the book. Because I would say that, like, I don't really feel like they ever return to that kind of happy tone. Even from, it's been a while, like I said, it's been a while since I've read Return of the King. But I don't even think by the end of Return of the King they ever, like, get back there.
No, because it's, like, it's from the perspective of Frodo and the general narrative. So, like, the narration tries to be back to the beginning, but I guess the idea is that Frodo is not the same. And so then he looks at everything
Yeah.
differently, despite it being just the same as it was before. Like, they keep talking about, like, nothing changed here. The world kept spinning and nothing happened, and now it's joyful and wonderful, and Frodo can't feel that way anymore. Like,
Yeah.
it's gone. So
Yeah.
that feeling of innocence and joy and happiness that you experienced through Frodo in the beginning and everything is completely gone.
I mean, there is a lot, at least for us. I mean, I can understand, like, people liking the books differently from the movies because they are different. But for me personally, like, if I was going to recommend Lord of the Rings to somebody who's never watched it, doesn't really know anything about it, I don't really know how that's possible. You live in a very strange bubble, like, if you know nothing about this. But I would probably say to watch the movies. And, like, honestly, if you're really casual, you can watch the regular, the theatrical ones. Yes, the long ones are the better ones, but, like, I would say, like, if you're a newbie and you just want to, like, figure out if you're gonna like this, you can watch those ones.
I will say, I disagree if you're going as far as to Return of the King. Say, for instance, you could probably watch The Fellowship theatrical, even The Two Towers. Return of the King is fucking weird if you don't have the extended, if you ask me. There's just so many little things that make no fucking sense because they cut these scenes. So that's my only correction. It's like, yeah, I guess if you don't want to sit for 3 hours and watch The Fellowship, fair enough, even though I totally disagree and would make you watch the extended. I get it. You can start with that. But if you get to Return of the King, do your transition.
I do my things like video game logic, which is you do it first the easy way. And then if you like it, you go back. And that's kind of the way that I, like, because, I mean, I do that with tons of books. Like, I've read books that are like the movies. Like, I'll watch the movie, and if I really like a movie and then I find out that there's a book, I'll normally read the book.
Yeah, that's what I do.
And so that's kind of the same thing to me, where it's like, watch the movie, like the shorter ones. If you don't like it, you're probably not going to like the longer ones. So, I mean, yeah, watch the theatrical Lord of the Rings. If you really like it, watch the extended one. Yeah, it's better. A lot of things make more sense. It's prettier. There's a lot more detail, you know? But if you're just trying to figure out if you will like this, try the short one.
Or you burn. Don't talk to me.
Julie won't accept you.
I won't accept you.
But, you know, for me, I mean, I mentioned this in one of our last videos. This is my favorite movie, like, ever of all time. For one thing, I really like fantasy. Fantasy is, like, very important to me. It's, like, my favorite genre. It's, like, the thing that makes me feel feelings in, it makes me care kind of way. And, like, that is how I feel about this movie. Like, I love, you know, the stuff with the hobbits. Like, I love the whole, like, nostalgia, and even, like, the music that they have for the hobbits is so... It fills you with that, like, nostalgia, and it makes you feel this kind of, like, peppy, happy, like, oh yeah, like, I'm glad to be here type of stuff. And then, you know, as you get later, and the music gets more epic, and, like, you know, things get more epic, and, like, the story is, like, very simple in a lot of ways, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think sometimes people do, like, they don't like that kind of storytelling that's just, like, here's the MacGuffin, do the thing with it. And it's like, but the thing about those kind of stories is it makes the objective very clear and less cluttered in ways. I mean, okay, it's Tolkien, so it's cluttered, but you still always know what the goal is. The goal is always, we have this great evil, we have to get rid of it, we gotta go do the thing. And that's always clear, and I like the story for that. Like, I like that it is just this goal, good versus evil.
Yeah, I would say the music is a huge component. And even just for Tolkien was a very musical-esque person. Like, there's so many songs and ditties and things because, like I said before, he kind of came up with a lot of this world by singing and doing silly things with his kids. And so, like, to have the music in this movie is amazing. It cannot be, like, I don't love any score more. There are scores that touch me differently, that, like, make me have different feelings of just, like, oh my gosh, and I feel it. There's not a single song in Lord of the Rings I don't love. Like, it's perfect for everything it did. And I can't talk enough about the music. Like she was saying, like it's a completely different tone. Like every single terrain throughout all the movies have different tones and points to them. And even if they reprise certain pieces, like it's different. It's changed. Like it's so amazing.
Yeah, and I think I watched something kind of recently that was like talking about Fellowship of the Rings and like how they did the movie and stuff. And I think they were talking about how they started doing the Hobbit stuff and they hadn't heard the music yet. I think like they had started like composing it and things. And so I think like once they were kind of towards the end of the Hobbit stuff, they finally heard the music. And like I think like Peter Jackson was just like it's so perfect. Like that was like basically his reaction to it. And like that's, yeah, it just all the feelings. And it really is like that. We'll have to put in like a little clip of it here, but like it's just so like this like cute and like happy and like I really love the Hobbit song. I mean, I do love the stuff later, but like the stuff later is kind of, it's harder to quote because it's like it's like dramatic and like, mystical, like when they're around the elves and when Gandalf is dying. Sorry, a spoiler kind of. Like, it's so dramatic. Like, it's just this, like, edge of your seat, like, drums and, like, feelings. And, like, there's so much. Like, you always feel the music. The music, like, matches the tone perfectly every single time.
Yeah, not a misbeat. It's perfection at its most.
Yeah. And I will say, too, just getting a little bit past the music part of it, I love the cast. I honestly, I don't think that anybody is miscast.
No, I think I'm trying to think, like, I know some cast members did have problems themselves, like Saruman had his whatever and so on and so forth, but, like, I even kind of feel that way in The Hobbit. Like, music and casting was perfect. Like, no character seemed out of place or misdone. Like, Ian McKellen couldn't imagine a better Gandalf, even though they were talking to Sean Connery about being Gandalf, which is about the funniest fucking thing to me.
Oh yeah, he's perfect. Perfect Gandalf. And, like, they really all are. I mean, maybe the only thing I would disagree in The Hobbit, which we don't have to talk about this too much because we're not talking about The Hobbit, but Orlando Bloom and the thing they did with his eyes was very
He wasn't
bizarre.
Supposed to be there, so we don't even...
But whatever they did with his eyes was not good. Yeah, but even, like, Viggo Morrison, which was, like, a very late pick, too. I forget who they said they were going to have. They were going to have somebody kind of more famous, and I don't remember who it was. But then he backed out, and then they just, like, kind of picked Viggo, like, kind of on a whim. And then it was like, yeah, like, I can't imagine it not being Viggo as Aragorn. Like, he's just really good. Elijah Wood, Frodo. What?
It's supposed to be Nicolas Cage.
Oh my gosh, I thought it was something like that. Oh my gosh, we need to have our Nick Cage podcast so bad. I want to talk about Nick Cage more than anything. That man. all the things he does. I think wasn't he gonna be like Superman or something at one point? Nick Cage, everybody.
Yeah, Nicolas Cage. I love this article. I don't think you understand how much I would have paid to see Nicolas Cage in The Lord of the Rings.
Let's reshoot it. Let's
go again. Sean Connery, well, he's gone, but Daniel Day-Lewis was up for it. Russell Crowe was up for it.
But another way.
And Vin Diesel was up for it.
As Aragorn? Oh my gosh, no. Yeah, I want Nick Cage as Aragorn. Just for the lulz.
Can we recast like a whole Lord of the Rings bit? Like keep everything the same, but just change every single actor.
God,
like every line, every
elf, the parts where he's with Arwen. Oh my god, Nick Cage,
that'd be amazing. Be a work of a masterpiece. I can't believe I forgot that. I remember Sean Connery because I literally spent a whole day quoting Gandalf as Sean Connery. So I remember that. I didn't remember the Nick Cage, though.
I can't really do a very good Sean Connery accent, but, like, the Wizards Never Late, he's always precisely as Sean Connery. precisely what it means.
I can do Nick Cage. I can do Sean Connery 3 times a year. Don't know when they happen, but those days I am a perfect Sean Connery. You can ask my mother, because she, like, every time it happens, she's like, what the fuck? Because I'll just start talking to her and asking for things like Sean Connery.
He's too mouthy. Like, his stuff, it's like almost like he's got something in his mouth, and I can't do ones like that.
Like, just like super, like...
Yeah, we'll make this happen for sure. Yeah, but everything is like,
anyway.
Yeah, we got I mean, that's good, very good. But the other thing, like, I just kind of wanted to mention is, like, I mean, I talked about the story a little bit, but, like, even just, like, kind of the way that people are in this story, which I don't think you catch as much in the book, because the book it's a little bit older. It's quite an old book at this point. But, like, some of the stuff with, like, the relationships, which I can have, like, kind of one small complaint about Fellowship particularly. There's not a lot of women in these books, like, at all. It is a very odd thing. Like, you could pretty much read all these books and there's, like, 3. There's, like, 3 women total, which is bizarre. But that aside, I do really like the relationships between men in this story, because there is, like, a lot of stuff where, like, they care about each other and, like, they cry and, like, you know, they'll, like, you know, kiss each other on the head and stuff. And, like, it's very, in this way, it's masculine, but, like, it's not masculine in, like, the toxic way, I guess. Like, it's very, like, they're very forward with their emotions. Like, they very much, like, care about each other, and, like, they show that very clearly. And, you know, there's war and, like, fighting and, like, all this kind of stuff, but, like,
they're still manly men.
Yeah.
Like, it makes a point to be, like, not to downtrodden it, not to make it seem like it's a bad thing. It's a very, like, this is commonplace, this is healthy, this is, like, what we do, and we need more of that in storytelling and in the world.
Yeah. And I like that in this story. Like, I like the relationships that people, like, form in this story. Although I will say, my man Legolas, he speaks to Frodo one time and never again. So, you know, that was a pretty poor relationship.
Well, not to go back to the books too much, the relationship between Harwin and Aragorn makes no fucking sense in the books.
Yeah, they never talk about it.
At all.
It's just, like, there's a couple times where you'll, like, see them
just, like,
together.
daydreams about her, or, like, they're in passing. Like, it never, ever makes any sense. And I always love telling people that. I'm like, I have no idea they're together the entire book until he's just like, you're my wife now. Like, or when Elrond's, like, concerned about her. Like, that's it. Otherwise, I'm like, they're together? Like, I thought they just had weird mystic moments in the in the Fade. Like, I don't know what's happening. Like, they just keep talking about each other occasionally in some weird way. Like, I don't know. So if you thought it was weird in the movies, that's them doing their best. Because the book, he does not know what he's talking about.
Yeah, they changed, like, a couple things with that in general. Because I think even the other thing is in the books, like, Aragorn's not really... He's not as passive as he is in the movies, because, like, in the movies, they kind of make it out like he doesn't want this stuff, and I don't even really remember what the reasoning is in the movies. In the books, like, he wants it. Like, he's like, I want to be king. Like, that's what I want to do. That's, like, my goal. Like, he's not passive about it, but in the movies, he's kind of like, I don't
I think they're trying to build up his concern for the darkness of man, or whatever.
Yeah. Something like that.
Something.
But yeah, his character does a shift, but I would say, like, he's still enough of this. It's not really that big of a deal.
No, he's still, like, misty, cool, and whatnot, and since he's part of, like, not the Ishtari, what is he, the
Dunedain.
The Dunedain. Mm-hmm. Yeah, since he's that, it's kind of like, yeah, he's weird.
I do really like Legolas, too. Although some of this is in the books. Like... He's so funny as an elf, because, like, he does all this stuff where he's just like, yeah, this stuff isn't a burden to me, and whoop-de-doo,
yeah,
I'm out.
I'm an elf.
Because, like, one of the ones is like, I think this is mainly in the books, I don't think this is in the movies. it's like the part where they're like struggling with the snow and everything.
Yeah, in the movies they just show him like walking past them as they're like trugging through, and he's like, "There's a Val voice in the air," and they're like, "What? We can't hear shit."
But in the books, it's like they're all
teases
struggling.
them. Yeah,
he literally
teases
gets
them.
up, like they're all in the snow, and he's like up on top of it, and he's like, "I'm gonna go scout," and he just like, and it's like, wow,
You guys do that. I'll be
Legolas.
back. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, 2 more points with this before we kind of move on to like our second section in case if Julie has a couple more things to say. I will say that this does hold up incredibly well for a 20-year-old movie. I mean, like I just watched the last part of this the other day. Like it's very good. There's maybe a couple parts where you might notice some of the CGI maybe, but not really. He didn't do a lot of CGI. It's very good for a movie that's 20 years old, and that's incredibly rare. So Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, a treasure.
Holds up.
Also,
The only thing is the one scene with the cave troll when Frodo gets stabbed. That's always been awkward and weird.
yeah, there's a couple times that like I noticed stuff, and I think it's more just because I've been explained like how it worked essentially, and so like now when I watch it, I'm like, oh yeah.
How like the mirror thing works with the hobbits and regular people and all that.
Yeah, that, and then like a lot of, so like because CGI wasn't, I don't think it was like as, I mean like you could do it back then, but like it wasn't as big of a thing, and like especially if you wanted it to look good. So for a lot of things, like especially where they have the cities and like, you know, all the things like they wouldn't have in real life or whatever, a lot of times those are either I think most of the time they're miniatures. So like Minas Tirith or like what is it? Rivendell. Things like that. It's basically like a miniature that they had, and then they would like CGI things so like you would have people in the background, so it didn't just look like just empty and things like that. And there's a couple times where you can kind of tell that they did like a painting or something and had them like run across a line and then like put all the rest in the back basically. So like a lot of times this happens in Minas Tirith because like they have these parts where they're running across bridges and stuff, and it's like they couldn't really do that practically. So like you'll just be able to tell, you're like, yeah, they do look kind of weird there. Like
when I focus on it.
Yeah, they don't really look like they're real people necessarily. I mean, I'm sure they are, but like the way they like plopped them into the scene essentially. It's stuff like that, but like really you have to be looking for that stuff to know it, and I probably really only noticed because I watched this movie
A million times, yeah.
a lot, so
I only occasionally notice the Hobbit sizing thing because I know how it works, and I'm just like, it's a little weird.
Yeah, at times I think it's odd too. I think I noticed it more in like Return of the King or something, because there are like a few times where like it's mainly when they have them with other people.
Yeah.
And you're like
with Faramir.
Like, that's not right.
Like,
that can't be.
But it's funny because like when they're touching, like when they grab hobbits and stuff, I don't notice it that much then. I don't know if it's because of movement versus like it being standing still and staring. But yeah, when they're touching them and stuff, it's a different technique, I guess. And so I don't notice it then, but I do notice it like when they're standing near Faramir and it's like, what's going on there?
He's got a child in a wig there.
Like, what's like he's leaner than you, but you're smaller than him, and like this is weird.
I think I remember particularly in Return of the King, like the part where they're all like standing and they're like bow. Like I remember that looking weird because like something like about the way they did the heights and with them bowing or something. I was like, this doesn't like, something in my mind is telling me that this doesn't look correct, and I'm not sure why, but anyway. One other little fun fact that I just wanted to mention because I saw this and I loved this so much, and I wish so much that I would have been here when this happened, but Sean Bean was very afraid of helicopters. Like, he was afraid of flying and stuff at this time. So a lot of times, you know, they shot things on mountains and such, and they would like helicopter the people up there when they were in their costumes. But Sean Bean was so scared, he would go climb up the mountains, or like he would get on a ski lift. Could you imagine going to go ski and you see Sean Bean and you're like, oh my gosh, it's Boromir. I mean, I guess you wouldn't know at that time, but
yeah.
I love that fact. And like there's even like you can find like there are shots of him and you'll see like them in the helicopter and they're like looking
pointing at him.
Sean Bean just like walking up. It's so good.
That's pretty great.
Oh, and then I guess the second kind of other random fact, because I literally just rewatched this movie the other day. In the end credits, because this movie does take place in New Zealand, which is beautiful and wonderful, there is like this 10-minute section. It's probably even longer than that, where they list like all the babies that were born. And I'm guessing, maybe I need to look at it again, but like, I think it's all the babies that were born like in relation to the movies. Oh my gosh, it goes on for like 15 minutes. It's like every baby that was born in the vicinity, like, because I was looking at this and we had finished, like my husband was doing something and I was like going and cleaning or whatever, and I kept like coming back because I was just like listening to music because it's, you know, epic soundtrack and all that. And I come back and I'd be like, is this still the baby thing? And then I would be like, okay. And then I go leave, do another thing. I come back and I'm like, is this still the baby thing? Why? It's crazy. Everybody should experience this. It is so long. I just love of New Zealand. So, okay. So
well, for this last part, we've kind of already like gone over a lot of it, but we've talked about ways the book is weaker and what we think could be a better movement for it. We're trying to cut off on like a building moment because we try to always be like, this is what we would do or this is how it could be better. But we've already kind of done that.
Yeah, I think for me, for the books, I probably would have structured the first part differently. That's kind of my thing. I don't like the tone shift, personally. Like, when I'm reading one book, it's kind of weird to me. I get it. I think it's fine, like, if you were reading them as two separate things, although it would be confusing. But, yeah, I don't like the tone shift. I think those are really kind of the big things there.
Well, I love Two Towers, and so the second half of The Fellowship sounds more like that, and I've reread The Two Towers like 10 times over The Fellowship and The Return of the King. So as we kind of said, like, it's just a little windy and weird, like, in the beginning of The Fellowship, and I mean, of course we can't do justice to Tolkien. Like, I don't think we could have written any better or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that. It's just, I understand why it's hard for people to start.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, if you really wanted to read it and you're a little nervous, you could try listening to it. I found an Audible book. Let me actually see who's the guy who reads it. Because I thought his voice was appropriate. Because sometimes that's a problem with me with Audible books.
Yeah,
like,
I coupled it.
I was like, I can't do it if I don't like your voice. Like, it's like, I'm going to listen to you for like 10 hours. But I've been starting to listen to narrated by Rob Ingalls. And I think his voice works. Like, I think it's appropriate. So, I would suggest that. And then, yeah, if you're really, really a noob, like I said before, I would probably suggest watching the movie first and seeing if you even like it. I think that you will. I think for me, personally, the only part of the movie, which I did put this on here because I think it cracks me up. The only part of the movie that I would change is the part where Gandalf and Saruman are dueling, because the part where Saruman makes Gandalf spin cracks me up unreasonably every time. Because, like, he just makes him spin in this, like, and Gandalf's like, ah! And then he, like, shoots him off the ceiling. I want so badly for a behind the scenes of this. I want to see them make Ian McKellen spin. Because it's so, like, that part of it I would have changed. Like, I mean, they could still duel. I just, like, that part of it is, like, it's not supposed to be funny, and I think it's funny.
See, that part doesn't bother me at all. Because it's, like, I'm focused on what Saruman's saying. So, and then, like, Gandalf's anguish, so I don't laugh at that. But the part I would change, I mentioned earlier, is when the cave troll stabs Frodo, and he's just like, ugh, for, like, way too long.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I get that they're trying to add a dramatic flair of, like, did he die? And they wanted people to think he died. But they honestly could have just, like, made him go, ugh, and have him fall over. And it would have accomplished the same thing, instead of literally everyone going, Frodo! Ugh! Frodo! Ugh! Like, he's just like, it's just too much. Too dramatic, too heavy-handed. And then especially because he does all that, and they pick him up, and he's like, I'm not hurt, I'm alright. Like, Then why the fuck did you do that for so long?
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, I think, like, one of the things, too, which this is kind of a little bit of a weird one, that I like better in the movies, is I like some of the stuff with Boromir. I think I still like him in the books. Like, okay, it's a weird thing, and I think, like, I've kind of changed. Like, I was listening to somebody talk about this recently, and it kind of changed my opinions of Boromir. Because, like, in the books, he is pretty, like, made out to be a villain. And, I mean, I guess I would say that that's, like, the same in the movies. But I think, like, I really like him as a gray character, I've come to find. Because, like, the big thing with him, I think, is just, like, this, like, fear. That's really what it is. And, like, even, I think, in the extended version, I don't think they do as good of a job of this in the theatrical cut. It's like, basically, he lives in this place that is on the edge of war all the time. And, like, he thinks that his people are going to die. Like, that is just what he thinks is going to happen. And, like, it's traumatic for him. Like, it's his family, it's his brother, it's, like, everything that he's ever had. And, like, he's, like, they're all going to die. And, like, even, like, in the extended edition, there's a lot of Aragorn just being like, well, we're not going to do that. We have to go take the ring. Like, we can't help you. And, like, you can just, like, tell, like, Boromir's just like, yeah, but, like, all my people are going to die. Like, do you understand how hard that is for me? Like,
everyone's speaking more worldly, while he's like, my world is very small, and none of you care. And, like, so he tries so hard to be good that's ultimately what is his downfall. And it's kind of like showing the duality of man, that, like, no matter how good you are, like, darkness is always part of you. And yeah, I think Boromir, people give him a lot of shit, when really it's just like, people would be more like Boromir than they would be Aragorn. As much as people want to be Aragorn is a Dunedain. He's different. He's not really human in that way. But Boromir is a true human in the human experience of, like, no matter how good you want to do, it's not always the right thing. And
well, and even too, like, I think, you know, being older and, like, understanding things more and things like that, his, like, last scene even is very beautiful, because it's like that whole thing of, like I said, like, he's basically like, all my people are gonna die. Like, I'm dying. Like, I can't go back and protect my people. Like, I see the end. And, like, he's, like, crying and, like, he's upset. He's like, all my people are going to die. And, like, Aragorn's like, you know, like, don't worry about it. Like, I think you did a good thing. I'll do the best that I can to help your people and, like, all this kind of stuff. But, like, yeah, it's, like, it's very, I think, like, I feel very differently about Boromir than what I probably would have thought when I was a kid. And it's very interesting to kind of have that change of perspectives.
Well, I think people, when they don't read into his character, they think of him as someone who wants glory, someone who wants power, someone who wants to rule, when that's not him at all. That is 100% not what Boromir is. As you were saying, like, the entire time, he's just wants to save what little world he had. And the only thing he can think that would do that would be power. And to be fair, that is kind of the truth, like, of it all. And that's also what the ring's supposed to do. Like, it's part of his character is showing the power and depth of the ring. Just because it doesn't affect Frodo in the way that it's meant to, doesn't mean, like, it's affecting even Aragorn at parts that he has to fight. And Boromir shows the true darkness of what the ring does to you.
Yeah, and I mean, he feels bad, too. Like,
yeah.
Towards the end, you know, he does his whole, like, redeeming thing and all of that kind of stuff. But, like, I do think, like, his arc is very interesting. And it was interesting to have him in there, even though, you know, maybe to most people he came across as a villain. But, like, I do think, like, that gray is very interesting. And, like, that whole thing of, like, you know, like, because I think, like, when he basically goes to Galadriel, the thing, like, that happens to him when he's there is, like, she's basically like, yeah, all your people are gonna die. So, like, from that point on, that's, like, why, like, he kind of declines so rapidly, is because, like, I think she shows him a vision or something, and, like, it's basically like, all your people are gonna die. And so, like, he's just freaking out from then on, because he's like, I need to go back. Like, I don't know what I'm doing here anymore. Like, I'm, like, making a mistake, basically.
Yeah, I think she shows what would happen to Gondor if people don't come together, more or less. Like, that big fight where Rohan comes and saves the day and all that, like, that didn't happen in the vision that she showed him.
Yeah, I can't remember if she shows him a vision or if it's just, like, they're talking about it. But it's something along, like, she is basically like, hey, shit is gonna be fucked. It's not good. Like, you need to know this. Like, stuff is, like, happening. And he just, like, starts from there. That's, like, what causes his decline, basically. And he's just like, I gotta, like, we need to go back there. And in the books, they do a bigger thing with that because, like, he basically is like, hey, like, he's, like, trying to get them to go that way, like, the whole entire time. And they're kind of like, what good would it be? It's, like, kind of out of the way. Like, no, it's not out of the way. I don't remember what their reasoning is. I think there's something.
Well, Aragorn's very much like, I would never take that ring anywhere near men, because Aragorn kind of hates men as they are anyway. Yeah, so he's like, fuck that. Like, I'd rather go closer to orcs. Like, that's...
I'd rather just kill.
I'd rather just get killed. Like,
yeah.
But then there's, like, this weird fan theory about Galadriel, because she... Like, as much as Lord of the Rings shows elves in these, like, pure light and whatever, when you read Silmarillion and all other shit, they're fucked up. Like, they are some fucked up motherfuckers. Like, and so some people think it's, like, Galadriel's placement in his mind that, you know, she tells Frodo, like, he will try to take the ring. Like, that's all in her playbook of her testing herself to make the ring, like, available to her. And so, like, that's another weird thing, that she just manipulated Boromir, like, for her own gain, because it's Elven way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I thought I would mention that, because it was, like, kind of a thing.
We're Team Boromir
realized.
Here.
Yeah.
We like Boromir.
Yeah. I mean, you know, he's complicated. He's gray.
Yeah.
And I like gray.
We like gray characters.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Like, okay, like I said at the beginning, I do like good versus evil, and I like that whole thing. But yes, I enjoy gray. I think gray is more interesting most of the time, because if you have just, like, a character that's, like, goody two-shoes, and I mean, even, like we were saying earlier, I wouldn't even say that Frodo is like that. Like, Frodo is, like, essentially his whole thing is he wants to do this because he doesn't want bad things to happen to the Shire. Like, he wants to preserve good. And so he's doing this good thing, and, like, it is, like, kind of a sacrifice thing, but, like, it's not really because he wants to do it. It's, like, it's more he feels like he has to, because he feels like he's the only one who can. And so it really is, like, a burden to him. And that's, like, the way he treats it the whole time, is it's like, this is a thing I have to do. And he'll, you know, he thinks about the Shire a lot, and, like, he wants to go back, and, like, he basically is, like, pretty much resigned, like, that he's gonna die. Like, that's his whole thing. He's like, I'm never gonna see the Shire again. Like, it's not gonna happen. I'm gonna go do this. It, like, keeps getting heavier. The burden keeps getting worse. And, yeah. It's interesting. And I think it's interesting, especially for a book that's this old, to have so many, like, kind of gray things. Like, it's not so... It's cut and dry, but it's not as cut and dry.
Yeah, especially, like, the book is even more gray than the movies, because the movies had trouble explaining gray. So then, like, Tom Bombadil, all these characters got cut because they're like, I don't understand their purpose. Which was a complaint from the actor who played Saruman. He didn't fully understand, like, what Saruman's role was because of, like, the rainbow cloak and everything else.
Yeah, the rainbow cloak. He was like, why didn't I get a rainbow cloak?
Like, where's my rainbow cloak?
I don't want to be Saruman the white. I'm Saruman of many colors.
Yeah, come on. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, we couldn't do a better job in the movies or books, even if we do see flaws in them, to be the slight. And these flaws are, for the movies at least, they're very nitpicky. We're just like, this scene's just cringe now. Like, we've seen it so many times that it's, like, gotten to this weird phase for it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think I've definitely watched movies do cringier things.
Oh, yeah.
So, and movies that have come out more recently than this, so... You know, we talked about comedies recently, and I have watched some cringy comedies, so... Okay.
Thing.
This was Passion for Your Passions with Krista.
And Julie, where we talked about Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. On the next episode, we're going to be talking about theater.
So now we're on from books. I think we should go to movies. I don't know why I did that. I did the incorrect thing.
Whoops. Dramatic page turns. Psych.
Whoops. Wait. Hold on. Sorry. This was a very windy episode of Passion for Your Passions with Krista.
Julie. Julie.
Just say as far away as possible.
Julie.